Welcome to the Mentally Whole podcast. I am your host, Lauren Green, and stay tuned for a new episode. Hey fam, this is Lauren Green, and this is our first episode of the Mentally Whole podcast. I'm super excited to be recording today because this has been a dream of mine for a really long time. So first things first, let's get into our announcements for today. Our first announcement is please subscribe to the podcast and please share this podcast with someone who you think will be blessed by this podcast. Our second housekeeping announcement is I would like to thank the listeners for tuning in and listening. I was about to say thank the visitors, but we not at church. I need to thank all of the listeners for tuning in and listening to the podcast because you could have been doing anything else with your time, but you decided to tune into the episode. So I am forever grateful and forever appreciative of whoever is listening out there. Our second segment is fun facts. I thought that it was necessary for my listeners, honestly, to get to know more about me and my vision for the podcast in this first episode. So I'm probably going to do about 2 to 3 fun facts, and then we'll get into our next segment. So my first fun fact is I am a licensed graduate professional counselor in the state of Maryland. That fancy title means I am allowed to practice therapy in the state of Maryland. It also means that I have a supervisor that I meet with once a week to go over quality of cases, case notes, treatment plans, how to diagnose someone, you name it, we probably talk about it in supervision. The second fun fact is that I am an only child. A lot of people don't know that about me. But I am an only child. I don't have any brothers and sisters. I don't have any siblings. So growing up without any siblings really shaped who I was as a person and as an individual. Because as the only child, you are around a lot of adults and older kids. Because I had a lot of older cousins. So I was around a lot of older adults and older kids, which shaped my view of the world at a very young age. The third fun fact that I would like to share is that I am a Christian. I love Jesus. I love his word and his presence. So on this podcast, you will hear me talk about scriptures. You will hear me talk about his word and his amazing presence. Now, you don't necessarily have to be a Christian to listen to this podcast because I believe that you can learn something from that essentially is different from you, right? So we might not practice the same religion, but you can learn something from me. Amen? Amen. So that concludes our fun fact segment. And now we're going to start the best segment ever. So this segment is titled, What is the Mentally Whole Podcast? You're probably wondering, what is Lauren doing? Why is she starting a podcast? Why is she out here talking about this? Like, what's up? What's good? Right? So the beginning of this year was a shift for me personally, a shift in my career and a shift for my personal development. So in February, I officially became licensed as a licensed graduate professional counselor. And also at the beginning of this year, around April, I started therapy for myself, right? So being in therapy has showed me that there is a need for more safe spaces where we can talk about mental health, where we can talk about things that are bothering us. We can talk about things that we're struggling with, right? And I feel like mental health is now more so in the mainstream than it has ever been, but there's still a need for spaces where we can get into the nitty gritty of our issues, to the nitty gritty of what's tormenting us, and the nitty gritty of our fears and how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about certain issues. On the flip side to that, I have also been in the mental health field for the past 4 years. Yeah, it's been 4 years. And since I've been working in the mental health field, I've been made aware of a lot of different things in our community. The first thing that I've been made aware of is that people want help for whatever they are facing. And people truly want to be set free, but sometimes they go to people that cannot help them. Or the people they go to don't know really what to do with them, or they just don't have the right strategies. So my goal for this podcast is to provide strategies, to provide a plan for you to break free from whatever you are dealing with. And at the beginning of the episode, I said this podcast was something that I have been dreaming of doing for a while, because I already had an idea to do a podcast like a while ago, right? I just never did it. I never did it because I was afraid to do it. I was afraid of my own voice. I was afraid of what it would sound like. I was afraid of what people might say about me starting a podcast. I had even told my friend like a year ago, like, I really want to start doing Facebook Lives. Ever since people found out I was in the mental health field, they've always asked me questions about substance abuse. They always ask me questions about parenting. They've asked me questions about what you feel about this or what you feel about that. And I thought Facebook Lives was the avenue for me, right? I thought that was the avenue for me, but I really had to seek the Lord and say, hey, what avenue or what lane do you want me to do this in? And I was trying to be like everybody else and do Facebook Lives, but Facebook Lives was not my thing, right? And for so long, I was just so bound by fear and what people will say about me. But by starting this podcast, I demolish the spirit of fear. I'm going to go forth and do this podcast with all of my might and all of my strength that the Lord has given me. So that is kind of it for today. Episodes, I haven't really decided when I will drop episodes, but by subscribing to the podcast, you will always stay up to date about new episodes. So, thank you guys for tuning in again, and stay tuned to hear another episode next week. Have a great week.